on to the next panel discussion, and I request Bindya, if she has time, she please to stay on. Okay, that's great. So we have basically some simple case scenarios which we come across in our day-to-day life, and we would like to discuss them, how to manage them properly in the best possible way which is available to us. So we have an esteemed panel with me, Dr. Swasti. Dr. Swasti is a senior consultant in Max Hospital, Vaishali. She's a gynae oncosurgeon and a robotic surgeon as well. She has a vast experience in gynae oncology, and she's has a keen interest in gynae cancer surgeries and minimal access pelvic surgeries and natural access surgeries. Dr. Vandana Gupta ma'am is with us. Ma'am is the Vice President of East Delhi Gynae Forum and a Senior Gynae Consultant in Max Hospital, Patparganj. And we have Dr. Asha Sahai ma'am with us. She's a Senior Obs Gynae Consultant and has experience of working as a specialist in Government of Libya for 7 years. And she is practicing in 2 centers in East Delhi and a visiting consultant in Max Patparganj and Vaishali. She's a special interest in high risk pregnancy and adolescent health and menopause. We have our esteemed panelist, Dr. Poonam Goyal ma'am. She is an ART specialist and ultrasonologist practicing obs gynae for last 35 years. She's an HOD IVF infertility in Max Hospital, Vaishali. And she has been awarded with numerous awards and has many books credited to her as author and editor. And we have Dr. Seema with us. She is presently treasurer of East Delhi Gynae Forum. She's a senior consultant and a director of Dr. R.B. Gupta Medical College. And so we go on with the panel, just a short introduction as it has already been discussed. The overall incidence of the symptomatic ovarian cyst in premenopausal female being malignant is approximately 1 in 1,000. And it increases to 3 in 1,000 women at the age of 50. 20% of the borderline ovarian tumors appear as simple cyst on ultrasonography. So preoperative differentiation between benign and the malignant ovarian mass is absolutely essential. And the most common modality which is used is ultrasonography and the tumor markers. Why we need to differentiate is because we need to decide whether we need to do a conservative management wherever which possible and use of laparoscopic techniques where appropriate, avoiding a laparotomy in benign cases and referral to gynae oncologist when we are suspecting complex adnexal masses. So this is the first case. She is a 22-year-old unmarried girl. She presented with severe dysmenorrhea. An ultrasound shows a right ovarian complex cyst, 6 centimeters, query endometrioma. She comes with a CA-125 of 125 units per ml. And I would request Dr. Vandana ma'am to please take up this case. That what is the approach to this patient? What are the significance of the CA-125 in perimenopausal women? What other tumor markers should be done? Dr. Vandana ma'am?
Unmute Vandana.
Yeah. So this is a premenopausal, less than 40 years. She's just a 22-year-old with the ovarian tumor, which is a complex one, and with the CA-125 raised to the tune of three times. So CA-125, we are running after tumor markers. In premenopausal women, it is said tumor marker CA-125 has no role when it is a simple cyst. But because this is a primary marker for ovarian epithelial cancer, CA-125. But in 50 to 60% patients in even CA, it is not raised in early stages. So we have to be very careful how we are looking for it, because it is raised in many of those non-malignant situations like endometriosis, adenomyosis, pelvic infections like tuberculosis, which is very rampant in our country, diverticulitis, inflammatory bowel disease, and hepatic dysfunction. And other markers which we are supposed to look for in a premenopausal woman is to rule out cell cord tumors. So we are going to do alpha-fetoprotein, which is differentiating a yolk sac tumor, and HCG. We are looking for non-gestational ovarian choriocarcinoma. These are the guidelines. Some people add LDH also to it at times. These tumor markers these are basically for malignancy and are not advisable to be done when a patient is premenopausal, and we should not run after them, because as Dr. Bindya has said, they are specific for postmenopausal, where they might become necessary but not in premenopausal. And we've already said CA-125, but when CA-125 is rising very rapidly, then we are worried and referral is required, or CA-125 above 200. levels, again we look for gynae oncologist. But if it is less than 200, we say the levels greater than 5 times. If they are higher, then we are looking for a suspicious one. Otherwise, it is most likely to be benign. And as Meenakshi has said, we go for conservative management. Laparoscopy turns out to be the gold standard in such a case. And we can easily differentiate it on ultrasound features as well. An endometrioma most likely would have a very clear-cut features as a ground glass appearance. So the only thing I wanted to make clear that we should not run after CA125 in premenopausal women, and the patient by the name of the tumor marker becomes very, very sensitive and highly reactive and starts thinking adversely. So we have to counsel, and again we say CA125 is not to be done, and LDH is also not so specific. Alpha fetoprotein and HCG, and some guidelines say LDH can also be added.
Yes, ma'am. Very rightly said that CA125 does not need to be undertaken in all premenopausal women. And whenever there is a suspicion of a complex adnexal mass, as it has been mentioned in the ultrasound report, it's always a good idea that we should get the tumor markers LDH, AFP, and HCG to rule out any germ cell tumors. And if it is all normal, then endometriomas all need not go for surgery. We should take the surgical treatment as sparingly as possible in such young women. And next case is another interesting case. See, a 22-year-old unmarried lady with a heaviness and distension in the abdomen. She has regular cycles. She has an abdominal lump which is corresponding to 20 weeks gravid uterus size. It is mobile. It's non-tender. There's no clinical ascites features present. So what is the role of ultrasound in assessment of suspected ovarian masses? What is the role of routine use of CT or MRI? It has already been discussed. Just to reiterate the things. Dr. Poonam ma'am, would you like to take this question?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Meenakshi. As it has been already explained and very well, by this time we should all understand that ultrasound is the major investigation whenever you suspect or you see a mass in adnexa. And MRI definitely can help at some places, but ultrasound is the mainstay of your diagnosis. So what you have to see in ultrasound? In ultrasound, I feel Dr. Bindya has given us so many things to that Roma and that another thing. I think the best and the simplest is to go with aorta adnex model. That is the simplest one, and the specificity and the sensitivity of the aorta model is rather more than the other things. So first of all, the most important things come out to be how you have described that mass on ultrasound. So you have to see the mass and explain it on the basis of 6 important things. You can remember it as LSCS CA. Like from L, you need to see how many loculi are there. Then from S, you see whether the mass is solid or what is the extent of the solid area in the mass, approximate extent. Then from C, you see whether the mass is cystic. Then another S is for the shadowing if present in the mass. Then another C is for the color scoring in the mass, and A is for the ascites. So if your ultrasonologist is giving you the report on the basis and describing the mass on the basis of these 6 things, then you should be okay with that ultrasonologist. Otherwise, you need to learn your scans. And then after that, when you see describe the mass on the basis of these 6 things, then 50% of the masses will have a pattern which will be fixed to a specific thing, like endometrioma, like mucinous cyst adenoma, like simple cyst, like physiological cysts or follicular cysts of ovary, like dermoid. All this will go, and 50% masses will be like that. So nothing to be done, just a good description of the mass, and now you have the diagnosis. You don't need any tumor marker, you don't need any MRI and nothing else. And then rest of the 50% mass, we go by the benign and the malignant rules. that Dr. Bindya has just described, and Meenakshi had just put the slide also. When these 5 benign things we note, these five benign things, if one or more than one benign feature is present and there is no malignant feature, the mass is 100% benign. And when the one or more than one malignant feature is present without any benign feature, the mass is malignant. But in this 25% more masses will go. Now we are left with the 25% where they are not fitting in malignant, or they are not fitting in benign. Either they are having the features of the both, or they are not having any feature, not of benign or not of malignant. In those particular cases, we go by IOTA-Adinex model. Dr. Bindya had said we need to take an app and etc. It is freely available on the net. You can just download. You don't need to even download. You just go to the site and open that. It's free. Only what you have to add age, and the CA125 is also optional there. And from the Adinex model, then you will get that picture that Dr. Bindya showed. Yes, this one, which will clearly explain to you how much chances of mass having malignant. And if there are good chances of mass having malignant, then obviously what Dr. Bindya said, we should go for a frozen section and then move. And if the mass is clearly malignant and patient is postmenopausal type, then straight away we can move for a malignant, hysterectomy for malignant masses with ovarian.
Very nicely said, ma'am. And we must do this slide is very, very important.
I think this we should keep on our table. All those who are doing ultrasound, just go on ticking whatever is present, whatever is not present, and then in the end you see whether the mass is benign, whether the mass is malignant. If not in any, just go to the Adinex model. In 5 minutes you will have the report.
Yeah, even if we are not going for an IOTA-Adinex model, even IOTA has given a simple rules application which is free of cost on mobile. IOTA-Adinex application is there on mobile. That is a paid one. It costs about 1,700 on an iPhone and 1,100 on an Android phone.
But
this IOTA, no ma'am, on website is free, but the application is paid.
Website mein Adinex model wo free.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll put it in our group.
Yes. And we must all know that the sonographic characteristic that are
I have not read anything, and I am daily getting my reports on that.
Yes, ma'am. Mobile application, it was showing. Sonographic characteristics that have been typically associated with ovarian malignancy are solid component, often nodular or papillary. Septations, if present, are they thick or not? Presence of ascites, peritoneal masses, enlarged lymph nodes. I think we should all dig in the reports and look for these features which are suggestive of a malignancy. And in this particular patient, showed that the ultrasound is a huge, uniloculated and a very thin-walled cyst, which is a right ovarian cyst. An MRI was also done. It's a good idea to get an MRI because a large ovarian cyst, ultrasound papillations can be missed.
And so also, if the girl is unmarried, you can't even do transvaginal. So little doubt in those patients.
So right ovarian cyst, 20 by 18 centimeter, thin walled with no solid areas. CA125 was done, which was 59. LDH, beta CG, and AFP, they were all negative as expected. So what is the risk of pregnancy for this patient? What the best surgical approach for this patient? Dr. Seema?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Meenakshi. As already discussed by Dr. Poonam Goyal, ma'am, the ultrasonography findings and the MRI findings don't suggest any of the malignant features. All of the features suggest of benign morphology. Though the cyst is big, but the morphology is supposedly benign. And the CA125 is also not very high, not a very suspicious. So the risk of malignancy in such a girl, she's a young girl, is very low. The best surgical approach to this patient would be a laparoscopic approach, and removal of the cyst, but most likely cystectomy would do for this patient. Without rupturing the cyst is better, and taking out the cyst from the umbilical port is a better option. So laparoscopic cystectomy is the best approach for this patient.
So in this patient, there was a huge right ovarian cyst, and basically a Palmer's point entry was done, and a laparoscopic ovarian cystectomy was done after aspiration, and all due care was taken to avoid any spillage. And after the cystectomy, the specimen was retrieved. It was very thinned out. It was retrieved through a suprapubic, just 10 mm, just a 20 mm incision. And basically, a thorough peritoneal was done after that. Histopathology came benign serous cyst adenoma. So we are able to avoid a big laparotomy scar. It was a benign cyst. So this was the take-home message in this patient. So we come to the next case. She is a 28-year-old primi gravida and had a spontaneous conception. She comes to me at 14 weeks of pregnancy with an ultrasound showing a single live fetus of 14 weeks, 2 days, NT 2.89 and B normal, with right ovarian complex cyst of 91 by 51 mm. Patient was followed at 18 weeks again, and there was no increase in size of the cyst. CA125, however, is not very relevant in the patient, especially in the pregnancy. Still, it was done and it was negative. And CA19.9, obviously, it was negative. So how should we counsel this patient? She's a primi gravida, spontaneous conception, young patient, 28-year-old. So with a complex ovarian cyst, how should we go about in this patient? What are the indications? When should we be doing surgery in this patient? Dr. Asha Sai, can you please plan a roadmap for this patient? Dr. Asha Sai, ma'am, are you there? Dr. Asha Sai, ma'am?
Oh, sorry. Hello,
Yes,
thank you, Dr. Meenakshi. And as we see, she's a primi gravida, spontaneous conception, and incidental finding of a ovarian cyst on ultrasound, which is definitely very upsetting for the patient. So counseling is the first thing which we have to do about it, and definitely repeated ultrasounds she will be requiring. So what we have to counsel her about is that she need not worry about that. Only thing is that we have to look for the incidental findings. If there is acute pain, the surgery is there. If there is a torsion, if there is hemorrhage, or if there is increase in size of the cyst. So if the patient doesn't come with any acute abdominal, any accidental findings like that, so then we have to keep on seeing her repeatedly, like we see her every month, and keep on seeing the increase in the fetus, the well-being of the fetus, and increase in the size of the cyst also. If there is sudden increase in the size of the cyst, then definitely we will have to counsel her again that she can undergo surgery in the second trimester. But if there is not much increase in the size of the cyst, and then we can just wait and watch, and wait up to at least 36 weeks, 38 weeks, and then go in for C-section if obstetric indication is there. And at that time, we can remove the cyst.
Yes, ma'am. Basically, we need to see that even in the first trimester, 30% of the patients come with an adnexal cyst, and 90% of them are corpus luteum cysto pregnancy. So it's very, very important that we do not act on the first trimester simple cysts, which are corpus luteal cysts. We should not be disturbing them. Second, they can have a torsion, rupture, hemorrhage, which are more than 5 centimeters of the cyst. Then this torsion, rupture, and hemorrhage can occur. So the indications of surgery are the complex cyst with suspicion of malignancy. This patient, when she came to me with a right adnexal complex cyst, I sent her to a different ultrasonologist, and I discussed with the ultrasonologist that what is the character of the cyst. Is it really looking malignant or is it looking benign? And then I discussed and says it's a benign appearing cyst. So we discussed the patient and she wanted a conservative management for this patient. So a patient was counseled for either a lap ovarian cystectomy. Ideal time would have been a second trimester, or patient should go for conservative with a counseling that if there's a torsion or any hemorrhage or any acute abdomen, then patient may have to be operated in emergency. However, this patient underwent normal pregnancy and underwent an LSES for fetal distress at 39 weeks. Intraoperatively, there was single live fetus, cephalic, and right ovarian cystectomy was done. So this was a ovarian cyst which was looking intraoperatively. So it was clearly clean and neatly ovarian cystectomy was done, and it came out to be a mature cystic teratoma. So the indications of surgery in such patients are the complex cyst where suspicion of pregnancy is there. and they're increasing in size, or they're coming with the symptoms suggestive of torsion, rupture, or bleeding. MRI may be useful when we are evaluating with dealing with suspicious cysts. If surgery is necessary, this can be most safely performed early in the second trimester. In experienced hands, a laparoscopic approach appears safe. An ovarian cyst diagnosed at the time of cesarean section should be removed, cystectomy or oophorectomy rather than aspirated, unless it is obviously a functional cyst, when it should be left intact. So this case was handled nicely. This is a 45-year-old patient. She's para 2, live 2 with previous to cesarean. She presented with an abdominal lump and pain. It was a huge abdominal mass of 28 weeks gravid size, which was more on the left side. It was mobile, non-tender, and perspectrum of cervix was healthy, and PVA huge mass was felt in both fornix, and uterus was not felt separately. Ultrasound presented with a large uniloculated cystic lesions in the left adnexa, 21 centimeters by 17 centimeters and 14 centimeters, with a 2.8 liters of liquid inside it. And the uterus was normal, endometrial thickness was 7.1. CCT was done, which was shown a huge thin-walled cyst of 1900 cc volume, and there's a low lymphadenopathy. CA125 was 67 and CA19.9 was normal. So, Dr. Swasti, I would like to address this question. What is the best way to estimate the risk of malignancy in such patient, and which is the best surgical approach for this patient?
So, Dr. Meenakshi, thank you for having me here. And this lady is 45. She's premenopausal. We know her marker status seems to have a low risk of malignancy. So I think one could go ahead, and the only challenge is that the largest dimension is 21 centimeters. So you have to identify a safe laparoscopic entry, maybe doing an open port technique or using a Palmer's very, very safely, making a small port, and then just safely decompressing the cyst under vision, which is important. And, first doing a very good inspection on all the sides. If there is a slightest suspicion on laparoscopy, it is always better to convert at the same time into an open surgery and avoid spillage at all costs. And these kind of things we always discuss with the women whenever we take them up for surgical procedure. So it's always better to have a scar rather than to have a spillage and having a malignancy or a borderline change later on, because that ruins your chances and upstages disease and subjects you to more chemotherapy and with so many other things. So I think in this lady with imaging and marker support, we can safely go ahead and do a laparoscopy. The only thing is we should avoid morcellation of the cyst wall at multiple places. So, because it's a large cyst and she's already, had conception, we should try and take out the entire cyst into a bag, avoid multiple morcellations, because then you can miss a borderline change, even if it is there. And of course, even if you morcellate into multiple small pieces, the pathologist will be very unhappy to comment on any kind of abnormalities. So I think that answers both questions.
Yes, ma'am. So ovarian cysts, they present in, a Pandora box, basically. They're another Pandora box for us. And this was the RMI, which was already discussed, so we are going to skip this slide. So this was the intraoperative finding. Basically, the aspiration was planned, and just by the neck, it came out to be a huge brown color fluid. It looked like a big endometrioma. And when I inspected after decompressing the cyst and aspirating it, I found a dense bowel adhesions posteriorly, and the other ovary was also multicystic and not looking healthy. So, and there were, since in view of the dense bowel adhesions, I converted this patient to a laparotomy. I did a pan hysterectomy for this patient. And the histopathology left ovarian benign serous cyst adenoma on the left side, and the right ovarian benign serous cyst. Rest was unremarkable. So this gave an impression that it was an endometriotic cyst. I've never seen such a big, huge endometrioma, but the final report came out to be a benign serous cyst adenoma only. So, Dr. Swasti, I have a question for you. What should be done if in a presumed benign ovarian cyst, like we are presuming that it's a benign ovarian cyst, but when we go inside and we found that it is malignant, maybe we have planned a pan hysterectomy for this patient, and then we found out that the ovarian cyst is not looking benign at all, and we are really confused. So how should we go about this patient? And the oncosurgeon is not really available at the time of the surgery. and a gynecologist, routine gynecologist, we are doing the surgery. So what steps or what procedures should be taken so that we do a good job for the patient?
So there are 3-4 things that we must always keep into consideration whenever we are dealing with a keep a very high index of suspicion for all head neck cell masses. They can anytime turn to give you an intraoperative surprise. If you are planning a frozen section in advance, then obviously an oncosurgeon should be on a standby mode at least to be able to pitch in if it turns out to be malignant. In case you have not planned a frozen section and you thought that the situation is looking more of a benign nature and the cyst is looking not so nasty, then even then, and you open up and you find there are deposits somewhere and which was not picked up on imaging, every head neck cell mass always take a peritoneal washing for cytology. So minimum 100 ml of saline and put it in all quadrants of the abdomen, then collect it, and if it's bloody or hemorrhagic, must add at least 0.1 ml of 5,000 or 3,000 dilutions of heparin to avoid any kind of clotting, and that could be sent later on as a part of the staging procedure. If there is no consent for a complete staging, then obviously we cannot do a staging, because consent is very, very important for doing any kind of an operative procedure. Otherwise, we all land up into medico-legal problems. Third thing, what is the age of the patient and what is the desire for conception? So suppose you're dealing with a 27-year-old lady, a girl who is unmarried and wants fertility preservation, then the most that you can do is at least do a unilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. For a large presumed benign ovarian cyst also, we always do take a consent for an SOS salpingo-oophorectomy in case no normal ovarian tissue is seen. So a pre-op imaging should be revisited at the time of surgery. Look again, feel again, and see both at the time of surgery. If there's no normal ovarian tissue, then we should do at least a unilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. That will cut down her risk of recurrence, even in case it comes out to be a borderline tumor. Now the question is, suppose you're dealing with a 45-year-old and you had already planned a hysterectomy for her with a BSO or not with a BSO. In that kind of situation also, the most that you can do is do a peritoneal washings prior, and during surgery, inspect the abdomen carefully. So we always say it's an exploratory staging laparotomy. You explore the entire abdomen, right from the liver to the spleen and all 9 quadrants of the abdomen. So you look at and feel the omentum, the surface of the stomach, the bowel serosa, small and large bowel, the subdiaphragmatic peritoneum on both sides, the central tendon of the diaphragm, the root of the mesentery. Do a good bowel walk and look at the peritoneum on the paracolic gutters and the pelvis, and also for any kind of serosal deposits on the uterus and the other areas of the pelvis and abdomen. So that is good systematic exploration. Peritoneal biopsies is something that you don't need an additional consent for. You could always take a peritoneal biopsy so we take peritoneal biopsies from 6 sites. You take it right from top to bottom. Number 1 quadrant is your subdiaphragmatic peritoneums on both sides, paracolic gutter peritoneum on both sides, and pelvic peritoneum on both sides, and any kind of abnormal looking deposits can be excised. That is acceptable even if you don't have a consent for complete cytoreduction. But today's day and age, in all kinds of situations, unless the patient is very young and the family is very confused, to give you a proper consent prior to surgery, then it is always better to counsel them pre-operatively. Intraoperative consent has no role. So when your patient is under anesthesia, there's absolutely no way. So, many of times it happens that my colleagues, pitch in and say, come Swasti, there's a looking like a malignancy, let's send a frozen and do. I say, do what? Can we proceed or not? Is the basic question. So what maximum we can do is this, if we don't have a consent. So going and talking to the family when the patient is under anesthesia is actually not the right thing to do. We have to be really very careful about what we have discussed and documented prior to surgery. Intraoperative consent is only valid in life-threatening situations. Then even no consent is valid. So the components of surgical staging will always include a good systematic exploration, peritoneal cytology, and if you have a consent, you should be able to do, I think all gynecologists should be able to do at least a good omentectomy. So we should know the upper abdomen anatomy where, most of the times that becomes a challenge. So I think once we start exploring and doing hysterectomies, we should also put our hands and eyes into the upper abdomen and look for the omental anatomy. How to go under the arch, above the arch, do a supracolic omentectomy and an intracolic omentectomy. These are the basic kind of procedures that we should be able to do, even with gynecologists.
Excuse me, there's a noise, please. Someone else is speaking in between.
Dr. Tara,
Please mute yourself. Dr. Swasti, please go ahead.
can we mute her, Meenakshi?
Malti?
So, omentectomy is something that we all can, perform. It is not a big procedure. The only challenge is if the disease is advanced and you're dealing with an omental cake and unfortunately the imaging hadn't picked up and you don't have an oncosurgeon with you, it's better to take biopsies, post the patient for chemotherapy after the histopathology report, and then do a second stage interval cytoreduction to complete the job. So I think there are some kind of things, and never be afraid of doing a good ureteric dissection. It just takes 5 cases for any one of us to stand up and start doing these procedures. It's not more than that.
Thank you, Dr. Swasti. It was very well addressed, and we must all know what all should be done in surgical imaging. And if a consent has not been taken, and consent is just taken off a pan hysterectomy, still you should be able to palpate everything, document properly, take the cytology, take the peritoneal biopsy, because that will help the subsequent gyne-oncology team to manage that patient well.
And very importantly also, whenever you are in doubt of your imaging, suppose you had a patient who's done an imaging outside and you're not very confident, you don't have the films, you don't have very fine sections to look at. In those situations, you could always put in a laparoscope first and avoid, opening the abdomen so much and just look at what kind of, so even we do that whenever you're dealing with very, very advanced disease, whether you can actually do a cytoreduction in this patient or not, with an ovarian cancer. So you could always use a lesser invasive modality to go in, creep, explore, look. So a laparoscopic exploration is absolutely, recommended in even advanced ovarian cancer patients. In fact, if you have a challenge with imaging and this, if you yourself evaluated, it's fine. If you're unable to do it, it's very difficult to tell your patients every time, go repeat the test. I don't believe in this test. Everything has a cost added to it. Everything has logistics added to it. So it's very difficult to keep saying, go ahead. So I'll give you an example in this situation. It's a very interesting thing, which I think worth mentioning in this forum. I was referred a 29-year-old unmarried girl. She was being treated outside at a good reputed hospital for endometriosis. And she had about 6 centimeter size endometrioma, which was mentioned as an endometrioma on imaging. I think we should learn to give up talking about histopathological diagnosis on imaging. This is something we should always get off the habit now. So they did an MRI 4 months back, and there was a solid area which they said it was clotted blood. So they kept her under a watchful conservative approach. And they repeated an MRI again after 3 months. The CA-125 levels were not very high. She was 60, 65. And in the next visit, when they did an MR, the solid area increased. And they said, it's old, the MRI kept on saying it's old clotted blood, okay? And she was being treated for endometriosis, multiple medical managements in the last 3 years. So with those 2 MRIs, she was referred and a CA-125 of 65. So now the question was, should I do something or should I not do something? What should be my approach? As a gyne-oncosurgeon, what should I say I should do? So I looked at the films. Fortunately, the imaging was very good. They had very nice films and I could look at all the sections very well. Now, what was happening was in the 3-month sequential MRI, the size of the solid area had increased by about 1.5 to 2 centimeters, which was clearly seen. But the size of the entire cyst was not increased. It was almost 6.5 centimeters, so not much substantial increase. So definitely in 3 months' time, you wouldn't have old clotted blood which increases from 2 centimeter to 4 centimeter in your mass. So this was abnormal. So I spoke to the family, I told them, counsel, that we are going to, I told them, they said, no, do a cystectomy, don't remove this ovary. I said, I'm not going to do a cystectomy. Believe me, I have 99% doubt. She said that it could be a clear cell carcinoma. And can you believe it? They were hunting my life. I said, do a laparoscopy. I said, no. Then they took multiple opinions and most of the people told them, yes, we can go ahead and do a laparoscopy because it seems like endometriosis. And what we found on table when I did an exploration, but the father was very firm, he was like, okay, ma'am, whatever you think, go ahead. So that's how I got the consent. And what we found was a very, very complex mass and adherent to the rectosigmoid in its posterior aspect. And that's where the solid component was. So that was the area of invasion. Without rupturing, fortunately, I sent that mass and it came out to be a clear cell carcinoma. This is a 29-year-old with a 3-month symptom of dysmenorrhea and being treated for endometriosis empirically. And, this is challenging. And CA 125 of 65. So whatever said and done, however much you explore into an neck cell mass, you'll never be able to, give this is 100%. So it will vary. And all the kind of experiences that we share with each other, which was a lot of learning for me today also. So whatever we share with each other probably helps all of us to build, more and more details on that. So I was very upset after surgery and they insisted that, see on the frozen, I did not know it's a clear cell carcinoma, but in my heart, I knew it was a clear cell carcinoma. Frozen just said positive for malignancy. So I asked them, does it look like clear cells? So they said, no, we are not sure. But what else could it have been other than a clear cell? So then they refused because of financial issues. They refused a cryopreservation. I offered them a cryopreservation of oocytes followed by chemotherapy and so on. Because clear cell is a high-risk histology. You have to treat it, with a lot of caution. So, unfortunately, that did not happen. And she was subjected to chemotherapy and everything else. So I had done a fertility preservation, just keeping up my hopes, thinking it will not be a clear cell. But then God has its own ways.
Right, very right. Thank you,
Dr. Swasti. I just wanted to ask that endometriomas usually have collected blood, and which is an old blood. And old collected blood would not become solid at any point.
It can, ma'am, it can.
But Dr. Swasti, here this was increasing in size. So most
That
likely, when you have
That
old
is
blood,
what was the differentiating factor because it increased by about 2 centimeters.
yeah.
The
So
solid component. So, see, if you have a long-standing endometrioma, 6 years, you could have a little small collected blood somewhere.
that's okay.
But it
But
wouldn't
a 2
increase.
centimeter solid component definitely should arise as a suspicion, and especially with endometriomas, as you rightly say, clear cell cancer. And like what you said, even I had the same experience with a young newly married girl coming to us, and she had a dual pathology. She also had follicular carcinoma of thyroid because when I was examining her, she had a thyroid nodule, and that came out to be a follicular carcinoma of thyroid. So it was a dual pathology. It was
Dual
there.
pathology.
So,
Sometimes God is not so kind.
It's like Pandora's box.
Really.
Can I pitch in, Dr. Bindya? I had a patient that was a long time back. It is 20 years back. And that time, all these imagings and things were not that much. So patients are coming to us only with ultrasounds. And it was similar, treated as endometrioma, but it was fixed. And it was giving her a lot of pain. So we consulted a surgeon also. It was fixed. We went in for a laparotomy. And it was fixed to the cecum. And on the frozen section, it turned out to be a CA cecum. And then they did a heavy colectomy and partial omentectomy and everything. And she was explained that now she was recently married, but very educated family. She went for a chemotherapy, everything. And they said, okay, we'll go in for an adoption and things like that. But she came to me after 1.5 years of stopping of chemotherapy. And with 3 months amenorrhea on ultrasound, she had 8 weeks pregnancy because the other side ovaries and tube were nice. And then she delivered a premature 32 weeks cesarean section, male baby, who is 18 years old now. So that's what abdomen is, the Pandora box, and
Exactly. And these are two success stories, which we have with these complex pathologies coming up. And there must have been a very good surgery done, CA cecum and complete surgery done. That is why she survived for so long,
Yeah.
So whenever we are dealing with adnexal masses, we also should keep the non-adnexal pathologies also into consideration.
So we had an yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Krukenberg is also something which you find so commonly, A 19-year-old referred for bilateral dermoids, and I was told, okay, just do the surgery. And when I examined her, I did a PR. She was unmarried. She had a rectal growth, came out to be adenocarcinoma on a biopsy, and both those masses were actually Krukenbergs.
Yeah.
So your whole approach changes, So it starts right from the time, you actually touch the patient. When you examine the patient, it just begins there and then.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's so easy to miss an occult rectal growth, even on imaging. You wouldn't know.
Yeah, I know. I had this kind of a patient with bilateral ovarian masses. She turned out to be again a Krukenberg. Her CA9 was high, and she was 20 years old with pancreatic cancer. So you can have anything.
So this was an excellent discussion, and we got to know more cases, and we become a little wiser. So I think with this, we wind up the panel discussion. We can discuss the cases after I just stop the slide share. Basically, the key take-home messages I just want to bring out that classic benign features on ultrasound, simple or unilocular cystic masses, hemorrhagic cyst, endometrioma, mature cystic teratoma, and fibroma. The risk of malignancy for simple ovarian cystic masses is low, less than 1% for less than 10 centimeters in diameter. Patients with an ovarian mass of more than 5 centimeters in diameter are at increased risk of ovarian torsion. Laparoscopy is the recommended approach for surgical management of symptomatic benign ovarian masses because it is not only technically feasible and safe, but also provides the advantage of shorter hospital stay, faster recovery times, and less pain and bleeding compared with laparotomy. Comprehensive preoperative evaluation is most necessary in order to determine the risk of pregnancy of an ovarian mass before deciding on the appropriate surgical management. So when the pathology results reveal malignancy in an ovarian mass that had originally been presumed to be benign, comprehensive surgical staging should be performed by a surgeon with expertise in gynae-oncology if the resources permit. Thank you all panelists for an excellent discussion today. I will just stop the slide share.
Thank you, Meenakshi. Thank you.
It was really wonderful to discuss so many scenarios, both malignant and benign, and we discussed so many cases, and we turn wiser while we discuss these cases. And I think every month we should have a case discussion only on ovarian masses.
Yes. And Vindhya and Swasti as guide.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a discussion with bilateral discussion, and everybody chips in their experiences. And then very nice cases, Dr. Meenakshi, excellent discussion. Dr. Swasti, excellent inputs by you also. Very nice. And here I would like to say just one more interesting case. And this is like once really in my memory, it is like etched in my memory. We had a pregnant woman coming at 32 weeks, severe anemia, a very common situation in GTB hospital. And she only had, everything was normal. And one side ovary was enlarged, it was around 5 centimeters, just a large ovary. On the other side also, we could not see any other ovary. She just got an ultrasound report of a right ovarian mass on one side. And then she came with severe anemia. Everybody was giving a transfusion, iron deficiency anemia, a lot of workup was done. But, she was admitted with us, and I just happened to, just take a good history of the patient, and I asked her in detail. She told me she has bleeding PR. Got the endoscopy and all done. She turned out to be CA rectum. And and those were Krukenberg masses which she had in pregnancy. So they can just present like anything. So anybody would have said 5 centimeter mass, anything, and like this kind of picture, severe anemia, 2-3 grams is the routine picture in a hospital. We don't even pay attention to history. So it's very important to use this history. Clinical examination is very important before any kind of imaging, before any kind of tumor marker. I think a detailed, exhaustive clinical history, which I think our postgraduates are losing these days, it's very important. That is what I keep on telling them. Go into patient detail, go and ask more and more questions from the patient.
Yeah, not only postgraduates, I think each one of us in our clinical practice. We need to start with history taking, then examination, then ultrasound, then based on that, and I think that has been the biggest learning that we all have had today. It's been an excellent one. And Madam, I would like you to please come with your final comments.
I think adnexal mass is the biggest dilemma. And the maturity of the gynecologist is only how to deal the adnexal masses. Because malignancy, if it happens anybody, you can't be spared. So this is one thing about it. And I always believe in history and clinical examination, including a peer examination. So I think a younger gynecologist who believe in imaging, who believe in endoscopy and things like that have to get back to basic principles of history and examination. That's what I want to tell you. I've been trained to examine the patient from top to toe, and I think that reveals everything.
Exactly, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Madam. And
Thank you all.
thank you, Dr. Bindya, and all the panelists.
Thank you.
Meenakshi did a great job with such relevant cases today that each one of us has practically learned. And thanks everyone who's there today over here for being with us and staying with us till the end.
And I just said, we should not be very investigative in your patient. You should just rely on examination and ultrasound, and you find, this aorta is just an extension of your ultrasound examination. I think you have to be vigilant about it and see yourself that you're not sitting in a metro, you're sitting in a periphery somewhere in Ghaziabad or maybe Pilakpur or anywhere. And then try to please yourself. फिर ये साहब की आपकी ये सब खत्म हो जाएगी कि लैप्रोस्कोपी करना है, ये करना है, पेशेंट की जिंदगी बचनी चाहिए यार. This is what the main is. People will remember you. I always think I think Gandhiji's words should be very. आप remotest area में उस बंदे की सोचो, उसका क्या करोगे? Everybody cannot be Priyanka Gandhi, whom you should be operating. So this is what you need to think about it. Think about the 99% उनके पास ये access है कि नहीं, जो भी आप बोलते हो. And I think what you say today will be relevant to you on that particular aspect. So जब भी आप बात करोगे, उस particular point पे सिर्फ सोचने की बात करोगे, I think many senior people say that they have become irrelevant. I said irrelevance आपकी अपनी सोच के ऊपर है. आपकी अपनी सोच के ऊपर है whether you become irrelevant or not. आपको देखना है कि आपने उसको डिलीवर कराया है कि नहीं, और हर आदमी यही जानना चाहता आपने उसकी बीवी की जान बचाई कि नहीं जान बचाई. So that's it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. I think the simple BA and M rules, everyone should know by heart.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And a good clinical examination will go a long way, and a proper counseling whenever you are taking for the patient for surgery.
And doctor साहब आप अपने
1%
undergraduate
malignancy
की
should be.
किताब में भी पढ़ लो ना, undergraduate की किताब में यही रूल लिखे हुए
यही
हैं.
लिखे मैम, हाँ यही लिखे.
मैम आयोटा एडनिक्सा में भी यही रूल्स हैं जिसको उन्होंने एल्गोरिथम बना के उन्होंने दिया है स्कोरिंग सिस्टम. Actually, these are the basic rules. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Vidya. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You touched again 100 today.
Yes. Great thing. We touched 100 today.